The Xenomorph XX121, better known just as Xenomorph or the Alien, is an extraterrestrial hive-based endoparasitoid species with a multi-stage life cycle that is the titular antagonist of the Alien film series. The species made its debut in the film Alien and reappeared in the sequels Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, and pre-sequel Alien Covenant. Unlike many other recurring enemy extraterrestrial races in science fiction, the aliens are not an intelligent civilization, but predatory creatures with no higher goal than the propagation of their species and the destruction of life. The Xenomorph design was created by Swiss surrealist artist H.R. Giger, originating in a lithograph titled Necronome 4 and refined for the series' first film Alien. So let's see how this iconic creature, coming from the head of the great H.R. Giger, was part of one of the most important horror and science fiction movies in history. Before the Swiss artist joined the production, the director, screenwriters, and producers were exploring ideas which, in retrospect, may seem, shall we say, peculiar. As happens in many of these productions with extraterrestrial creatures, the final result is not at all similar to the first designs. Before Ridley Scott was introduced to H.R. Giger by visual effects specialist and writer of the screenplay for Alien, Dan O'Bannon, a handful of different ideas were thrown about in regard to depicting the sci-fi creature on screen. Very early in production, before Ridley Scott took the job of directing the film, Robert Aldrich was one of the candidates for bringing Alien to the big screen, and one of his ideas for the creature was for it to be orangutan totally shaped, an idea that could give the creature a quiet, unique appearance, but surely it would not scare anyone. Also early in the development process, Dan O'Bannon worked with artist Rob Cobb, who had done concept art for Dark Star and Star Wars, so he did some for Alien. Cobb's design was not so unique to Aldrich orangutan, but it was still a long way from what Giger would eventually bring to the table. His version of this xenomorph was a kind of crab monster with 4 legs and claws on his hands. The design fits more in the Star Wars universe than in the Alien movie, but it's worth noting that the artist is credited with the brilliant idea that the xenomorph has acid blood. O'Bannon introduced Scott to the artwork of H.R. Giger. Both of them felt that his painting Necronome 4 was the type of representation they want for the film antagonist, and began asking the studio to hire him as a designer. The 20th Century Fox initially believed Giger's work was too ghastly for audiences, but in the end, the request of the director and the writer prevailed. This is how they contact Giger and hire him to work on all aspects of the alien and its environment, including the surface of the planetoid, a spacecraft, and all 4 forms of the alien from the egg to the adult. Building the monster was particularly difficult. Several attempts were made before Giger decided to model the monster himself. It was felt the best way to create the alien was to use a man in a suit, and the one chosen was Bolaji Badejo, a Nigerian visual artist who by chance was found in a bar by one of the producers, who offered him the job. Thanks to his 7.2 feet tall, he was perfect to put himself in the shoes of the Nostromo stowaway. A plaster cast was made of Badejo's body. To create a statue of him, Giger then sculpted all sorts of weird items, including old Rolls-Royce tubes, snake parts, and animal meat to create the shape of the monster. A separate alien head was made by Carlo Rabaldi, a celebrated specialist in mechanization of artificial creatures. The head housed a highly complex apparatus that controlled the standing mouth within a mouth. The whole process took months, but the effort was well worth it. Giger also made a first design for the facehugger, which was a much larger creature than the final design in the film. Also, it had eyes and a spring-loaded tail. At first, Giger assumed that the facehugger would wrap around the outside of the astronaut's helmet, but Scott decided that it would have far more impact if the facehugger were revealed once the helmet was removed. Scott and Giger realized that the facehugger could burn through the helmet's faceplate with its acid blood. Subsequent redesigns of the space helmet include a far larger faceplate to allow for this. Dan O'Bannon initially conceived the facehugger as somehow resembling an octopus. However, when he received H.R. Giger designs, which substitute tentacles with finger-like digits, he thought Giger's design concept superior. Since no one was available at the time, O'Bannon decided to design the facehugger prop himself. The final look of the alien monster terrified audiences around the globe and was contributory to the fact that Alien won 1980s Academy Awards for visual effects, in addition to giving rise to a series of movies, comics, video games, toys, and countless marketing objects. Most movies, especially the big Hollywood productions, are the product of many artistic elements that combine to create an attractive audiovisual work for the viewer. In the case of Alien from 1979, that combination were the innovative script by Dan O'Bannon, the immersive music of Jerry Goldsmith, the compelling visual effects developed by Carlo Rabaldi, and of course the great direction of Ridley Scott. But without a doubt, and without detracting from all the professionals who did an exceptional job on the film, one of these artistic elements that made Alien go from being a good science fiction movie to an iconic film and a must-see in his genre was the work of Hans Reddy Giger. The design of this monster gave the production an icon that goes beyond the film itself. Millions of people who have seen the film and many others who have not have Giger's Xenomorph engraved in their memory in one way or another, making the Alien saga one of the most transcendental of contemporary science fiction, thanks to that creature and the artist who brought it to life with his own hands.